Elowyn Sablemere was banished while the victory dragons were still bleeding through their bandages. The decree was read at the center of Blackwind Flight Hospital, beneath rafters hung with old wing braces, silver thread reels, and the torn flight banners of the Eastern War. Outside, the Capitol bells practiced for the parade. Inside, every injured dragon lowered its head beneath splints and pain drafts, while men prepared to blame the woman who had kept their wings from tearing open for 23 years. Flight Marshal Roysten stood beside the operating table, in a spotless white marshal's coat. "Elowyn Sablemere," he said, holding the accusation slate before witnesses. "You are removed from all royal wing work for reckless silver thread repairs, unlawful stitch density, and suspected weakening of battle flight lines." Elowyn kept her damaged hands folded in front of her apron, her fingers no longer straightened fully. They had not straightened since the winter. She held a royal dragon's torn wing, closed with both palms, while Dragon King Cassiel Vardane flew through enemy fire. Cassiel stood 3 steps behind Roysten now, older, crowned, untouchable. He did not meet her eyes. Elowyn looked at the accusation slate. Which harnesses were examined? Roysten's expression remained grave and kind for the witnesses. The failures were traced to wing drag, not harness command. "That was not my question." Cassiel finally looked at her. His face gave nothing away, but she saw the old memory cut through him before he buried it. He remembered a black dragon fevered under winter blankets. He remembered Elowyn sitting awake through snow, with silver thread between her teeth. Then his voice came cold. "The Marshal reports that your repairs weakened the royal line." "My stitches do not weaken flight," she said. "They yield before tearing." Roysten sighed softly. "That is the language she always uses, Majesty. Flexible mercy, gentle repair. But battle wings do not need tenderness, they need obedience." Elowyn turned to him. "A healed wing obeys better than a frightened one." A few handlers shifted. Roysten noticed. "Sentiment is not evidence," he said. 3 dragons faltered during formation trials. All 3 carried your silver work. All 3 wore new command harnesses from your flight stores." Roysten's smile did not move. "Deflection." Cassiel's jaw tightened. "Enough." The word cut through the hospital like a blade drawn too late and aimed at the wrong throat. Elowyn looked at him then, not pleading, not wounded enough to give him comfort. "Did you examine the harnesses yourself?" "No." "Did you ask for the tension logs?" Roysten's office reviewed them. "Did you look at the wings?" His silence answered before his mouth did. Roysten lowered his voice for the room. "Majesty, the victory parade cannot be delayed because one mender refuses responsibility. The kingdom must see strength today." Elowyn nodded once. "Then, show them strength. But do not call my work failure, because your parade needs a clean story." Cassiel's eyes sharpened. "You are banished from Blackwind Flight Hospital until the flight line review is complete." The younger surgeon flinched. Elowyn did not. Roysten lifted a small iron blade and cut the silver mender's cord from her apron. It fell against the stone floor, pale as a vein pulled from the body of her life. "You may leave by the east gate," he said. "Quietly would be wise." Elowyn bent, picked up the cord, and wrapped it around her crooked fingers. "I have never repaired a wing quietly," she said, "only carefully." Outside, the first parade horn sounded. The hospital doors opened to the Capitol Avenue. Sunlight struck the sky as the royal battle dragons rose from the lower yards, enormous bodies cutting through banners of black and gold. Crowds roared. Drums rolled. Cassiel stepped toward the balcony with Roysten at his side, already belonging to the ceremony that had no place for her. Elowyn walked toward the east gate alone. Then the lead dragon unfolded his left wing above the hospital. Silver light ran across the underside. One stitch woke, then another. Not decoration, not blessing. Living wing stitches were made from silver thread drawn through dragon fire and repair blood. They did not choose favorites. They recorded tension, date, wound edge, and registered mender's hand so a repaired wing could be read under flight strain. The lead dragon's old tear line brightened from shoulder bone to flight tip. No thread snapped, no wound edge pulled. The silver line flexed cleanly with the strain. Across the glowing seam, one name appeared in steady silver letters. Elowyn Sablemere. The crowd's roar broke unevenly. Roysten went still. Cassiel's hand closed on the balcony rail. Another dragon banked over the avenue. 3 old repairs lit beneath its right wing, the same name burned through the sunlight. Elowyn stood beyond the gate with the cut cord in her hand and did not turn back until Cassiel spoke. Elowyn. There was command in it. Shock, too. Something almost like fear. She faced him across the open hospital threshold. "Your Majesty," she said, "if my stitches weakened your flight line, why is the sky holding on to my name?" First wing stitch witness. After Cassiel Vardane banished Elowyn Sablemere on Roysten Crail's claim that her repairs weakened the royal flight line, the living wing stitches activated under parade flight strain and displayed Elowyn's registered mender name across multiple battle wings, proving her repairs remained structurally bonded and traceable under lawful wing strain. Roysten Crail did not deny that Elowyn's name had appeared across the royal wings. He denied that a bonded stitch meant the flight line was safe. "Wing stitch glow proves traceability, not safety," he said from the hospital balcony, his voice carrying down into the parade avenue with the clean confidence of a man who had never stitched through night tremor. Old repairs can hold briefly before cascading failure. Parade strain is not battle strain. Elowyn stood beyond the east gate, with the cut silver cord wrapped around her damaged fingers. Above her, the lead dragon completed one slow turn. The glowing seam along his wing did not break. It flexed, narrowed, widened, then settled back into place. "Read the strain before you read the blame," she said. Cassiel Vardane had not moved from the balcony rail. His eyes were fixed on the silver letters burning under the dragon's wing, but his hand had shifted to the black iron rail as if he needed something colder than shame to hold. "Where did the wing drag begin?" he asked. Roysten gave a small bow. "Along repaired membranes, Majesty, as stated. That is a location, not a measurement." The flight marshal's smile remained. "The full logs are being compiled." Elowyn looked up at Cassiel. "Ask whether the wing failed where I touched it or where his harness pulled it." A murmur passed through the handlers below the hospital steps. Roysten turned toward them first. "Do not let spectacle confuse you. A visible stitch can mask deeper drag. Flexible yield often hides weakness until command tension exposes it." "Then show the command tension," Elowyn said. Cassiel looked toward the younger surgeon near the operating table. "Bring the formation trial logs." The young man hesitated. Roysten's voice sharpened only slightly. "Those are Marshal records. They concern royal dragons," Cassiel said. "Bring them." For the first time that morning, someone obeyed the king in a way Roysten had not arranged. The trial logs arrived in a leather case stamped with Blackwind Flight Command. Elowyn remained outside the gate. No one invited her in. She did not ask. Cassiel opened the first slate. Dragon Oralthorn, left wing repair line stable under ascent. Drag began at forward command buckle. Roysten stepped closer. "The buckle responds to membrane resistance. If her stitch density altered the natural pull, the harness merely revealed it. My stitches yield before tearing," Elowyn said. "They do not drag a buckle forward." Cassiel turned another slate. Dragon Vescure, right lower membrane. Repair seam stable. Drag began at lower cross strap. Another handler whispered. "That strap was new." Roysten answered without looking at him. All parade harnesses were updated to Marshal standard. Elowyn's gaze stayed on Cassiel. "Ask why all 3 dragons wore new command harnesses before they faltered." Cassiel read the third slate more slowly. Dragon Meron, old tier line stable. Drag began at crown issue tension point beneath the shoulder ring. The words changed the avenue more than the glowing names had. The names had shocked them. The measurements began to accuse the story. Roysten spread his hands. "Majesty, repaired wings require adapted harnessing. A standard point may show stress because the repair changed the wing's natural balance." Elowyn lifted her damaged hand. The crooked fingers trembled once, then steadied. "A repair can change balance. That is why tension logs compare the seam and the buckle." "Did yours?" Cassiel's face tightened. "Did the logs compare strain at the stitch seam and the harness buckle?" The younger surgeon looked at Roysten. "Answer the king," Elowyn said, "not the man who wrote your silence." The surgeon swallowed. "The seam readings were recorded, Majesty. They were not entered into the summary review." Cassiel looked up. Roysten's expression did not collapse. It became more careful. The summary prioritized operational failure points. Parade command requires simplicity. Simplicity cut her cord, Cassiel said. Elowyn felt the words strike too close. She did not let them become comfort. Your Majesty, she said, do not speak like a man discovering pain. Read like the man who signed it. His eyes came to hers then. There was a flicker of the winter she refused to hold for him. The black dragon, the fever. His younger hand passing her silver thread, her fingers breaking slowly around a wing he had begged her to save. He looked away first. Good. Above the avenue, Oralthorn banked again. The command harness strained against his forward buckle. A red pressure mark flared where leather bit into scale. The silver repair seam beside it stayed clean, bright, and unbroken. No thread snapped, no wound edge pulled. The fault line glowed at the harness point. Cassiel shut the log case with one hand. He did not apologize. He did not call her back inside. But when Roysten reached for the logs, Cassiel kept them. Harness, tension discrepancy, he ordered. Harness tension discrepancy. The formation failures appeared at the new command harness tension points issued through Roysten Crail's flight stores, not at Elowyn Sablemere's living wing stitch repair seams. The harness tension discrepancy did not prove Roysten Crail had sabotaged the Royal Dragons. It proved only that the formation failures began where the new command harnesses pulled, not where Elowyn Sablemere had repaired. Cassiel Vardane kept the trial logs in his hand while the parade above the avenue lost its rhythm. The dragons still flew, but the formations widened. Handlers watched buckle points now, not banners. The silver names under the wings continued to appear only when old repair seams took lawful strain. Roysten Crail adjusted one white cuff. Issue record proves distribution, Majesty, not defect. Elowyn stood outside the east gate, the cut mender's cord still wrapped around her crooked fingers. Read issue before intent. Cassiel looked down from the balcony. Who issued the new command harnesses? The flight stores, Roysten said. Whose authority? Mine, under Marshal standard. The words were clean, almost harmless. That was how official harm usually dressed itself. Cassiel turned to the younger surgeon. Bring the harness issue record. Roysten's voice softened. Majesty, parade command requires swift standardization. Repaired wings need firmer control. The issue schedule will show equipment discipline, not wrongdoing. Elowyn looked up at him. Ask whether coincidence wears the same buckle 3 times. The younger surgeon returned with a black ledger stamped flight stores. His hands shook less now. That mattered. Fear became useful when it learned to hold paper. Cassiel opened the ledger. Oralthorn. New forward command harness issued 2 days before formation trial. Roysten nodded. Standard. Veskir. New lower cross-strap harness issued the same day. Also standard. Merun. New shoulder ring harness issued the same day. The hospital balcony grew quieter. Roysten spread his hands. 3 battle dragons in the same parade wing received updated gear. That is ordinary preparation. Elowyn said, ordinary preparation is tested against the body wearing it. Cassiel read the next column. Were these harnesses tested on repaired wings? Roysten's smile held. Surface inspection passed. That is not my question. Elowyn did not look away from Cassiel. Ask whether the old harnesses were removed before comparison strain was taken. Cassiel lowered his eyes to the ledger. Old harnesses removed before second trial. No comparison strain attached. The words struck him slowly because they were not loud. They were simply too plain to dodge. Roysten turned toward the witnesses below. Old harnesses had battleware. They were unsafe for parade command. The Marshal standard required replacement. A standard can still be wrong, Elowyn said. A mender does not command the flight line. No, I kept it in the air, after command, tore it open. A handler made a small sound, and then hid it behind his sleeve. Cassiel heard. His face changed by a fraction. He flipped another page. Did the issue record mention Elowyn's seam readings? The younger surgeon answered before Roysten could. No, Majesty. Roysten's gaze sharpened. Because seam readings belong to medical repair files, not flight store issue. Elowyn lifted her damaged hand. A harness that pulls across a healed wound without reading the seam is not command. It is guesswork wearing leather. Cassiel's grip tightened on the ledger. Who approved the Marshal standard? Roysten bowed. I did, Majesty. Under wartime authority you granted after the Eastern Campaign. There it was. Not guilt yet, not crime, but a line from Cassiel's power to Roysten's procedure to Elowyn's banishment. Cassiel looked at the dragons overhead. The silver stitches flashed across one wing, then vanished as the strain changed. The buckle mark remained red. Did I read the issue record before signing her banishment order? He asked. Roysten answered carefully. The banishment concerned repair integrity, not store issue. Did I read it? No, Majesty. Elowyn felt the answer enter the space between them. She did not fill it for him. Cassiel looked at her then, and shame sat behind his eyes like a blade he had finally stopped handing to other men. Elowyn, he said. Do not give me my name because the ledger forced it into your mouth, she said. Read the next line. He did. All 3 harnesses issued through Flight Marshal stores marked Expedited Parade Command, no repaired wing fit test attached. Roysten stepped forward. Expedited Command saved the parade. Elowyn's voice went cold. It nearly made my work the corpse they buried your mistake under. The line did not make the crowd believe her. Belief was too easy a word for people who had watched her cord cut and said nothing. But the handlers began looking at the harness buckles with the sick attention of those who might have tightened them. The lead dragon banked again. The buckle strained red. The silver seam beside it held. Cassiel closed the issue ledger and kept it beside the trial logs. Harness, issue record, he ordered. Harness, issue record. All 3 dragons that faltered during formation trials had been fitted beforehand with new command harnesses issued through Roysten Crail's flight stores. The harness issue record did not prove Roysten Crail had designed the harnesses to fail. It proved only that all 3 faltering dragons had been fitted beforehand with new command harnesses from his flight stores. Roysten understood the weakness in that boundary before anyone else did. He stepped away from the balcony rail and addressed the witnesses below with the calm of a man arranging a safer room. Expedited Parade Command allowed temporary issue. Surface inspection passed. The harnesses were clean, balanced, and fit for royal formation. Elowyn Sablemere remained beyond the east gate. The gate bars crossed her body like a sentence the court had not yet learned to regret. Read fit before fault, she said. Cassiel Vardane looked at her through the bars, then looked down at the issue ledger. He had not invited her inside. He had not undone the banishment. He had only begun reading the evidence that should have been read before he let her cord be cut. That was not repair. It was the first sound of damage being measured. Were the new harnesses tested against repaired wing seam readings? Cassiel asked. Roysten's answer came smoothly. Repaired wing fit tests were optional under wartime standard. Optional, Elowyn repeated, for wings already held together by surgical yield. Roysten inclined his head. Your style created unusual fit requirements. The flight line cannot be governed by one mender's private method. My method is written in every seam yield reading I filed. Hospital files, he said. Not flight store issue. Cassiel turned to the younger surgeon. Were Elowyn's seam yield readings requested before the harnesses were fitted? The surgeon's throat moved. No, Majesty. A shadow crossed Cassiel's face. Were they available? Yes. Roysten spoke quickly, but not loudly. Available does not mean required. Emergency standardization required speed. Old harnesses had battle wear. Waiting for every medical notation would have delayed the parade wing. Elowyn looked up as Oralthorn passed overhead again, the red pressure mark at his buckle darker now beneath the bright, steady seam beside it. Ask whether a repaired wing was tested as a repaired wing. Cassiel read from the next slate. Surface inspection, leather balance, buckle alignment, command response, strap integrity. He paused. No seam yield comparison. No repaired membrane flex, Elowyn said. No live wing beat under harness pull, the younger surgeon added, then seemed startled that he had spoken. Roysten turned to him. Be careful. You are describing an ideal protocol, not a required one. The surgeon lowered his eyes. Elowyn did not. Speed is still disobedience when it blinds itself. Cassiel's gaze came to her, and for a moment he looked like the younger man who had once watched her hands go crooked around his dragon's wing and said nothing because the flight had survived. Gratitude remembered too late stood between them, useless and burning. He said, Did I approve expedited command without knowing comparison strain was missing? Roysten folded his hands behind his back. You approved Wartime Readiness Authority, Majesty. Flight stores acted within it. That is not my question. No written notice of missing comparison strain was attached to your authorization. The answer landed harder than a confession because it left Cassiel inside the failure. He had given the authority. Roysten had used it. Elowyn had paid for it. She saw Cassiel understand that sequence. She also saw him want to look at her. Do not make me the place where you put that, she said. He looked back to the slate. Were unrepaired wings tested differently from repaired wings? He asked. Roysten's eyes narrowed by a fraction. Unrepaired wings required no seam yield accommodation. So the repaired wings received the same harness standard as wings without old tier lines. Uniform command prevents unequal formation response. Elowyn's laugh was soft and cold. Uniform command on unequal bodies is not discipline. It is negligence with matching straps. The handlers below the balcony did not murmur this time. They watched the sky, where the parade had become a trial written in movement. Oralthorn's repaired seam flexed cleanly. The new buckle bit. Veskir's lower cross strap pulled hard enough to flare red along the edge of scale. Mehrunes widened formation to spare his shoulder ring. Cassiel saw all three. Who removed the old harnesses before comparison? He asked. The flight stores team, Roysten said. Under whose order? Under Marshal standard. Whose order? Roysten's yaw held. Mine. Elowyn let the word remain untouched. Intent could wait. The record did not need him guilty yet. It only needed him precise. Cassiel placed the issue ledger beside the trial logs and opened the harness standard slate. Enter this, he said. Roysten stepped forward. Majesty, omission does not prove defect. No, Cassiel said. It proves I banished her before knowing what had not been tested. Elowyn's fingers tightened around the cut cord. She hated that the admission reached her. She hated more that it was still not enough. Then write it as testing, she said. Not regret. Cassiel lowered his eyes first. Harness, test, omission, he ordered. Harness, test, omission. The new command harnesses were issued to repaired battle wings before they had been tested against Elowyn Sablemere's living wing stitch seam yield readings. The parade had learned to fly around the truth. Above the avenue, the royal dragons held wider spaces between their wings. Below them, Cassiel Vardane opened the flight line review that had carried Elowyn Sablemere's banishment like a finished verdict. Roysten Crail stood beside him with both hands clasped behind his white coat. Summary reports operational failure, Majesty, not the full medical archive. Elowyn remained outside the east gate. The hospital threshold still belonged to the banishment order. Cassiel had not crossed it for her. He had not called her back. The cut mender's cord stayed wrapped around her damaged fingers. A quiet reminder that evidence could move faster than mercy. Read omission before accusation, she said. Cassiel looked at the review slate. Flight line failure attributed to excessive silver thread density, flexible seam yield, and irregular drag around repaired membranes. Roysten inclined his head. A sufficient summary for temporary suspension. Were seam readings recorded before this review? Cassiel asked. The younger surgeon answered, Yes, Majesty. Roysten gave him a mild look. Medical readings were secondary data. Elowyn's eyes did not leave Cassiel. Ask whether a summary can condemn what it refused to include. Cassiel turned one page. Did the summary say seam readings were omitted? No, Majesty, the surgeon said. Roysten stepped forward. Omission is not concealment. Command. Readiness reviews prioritize failure behavior. Stable seam readings do not exclude deeper wing drag. My seams were the accused failure behavior, Elowyn said. You cannot call them guilty and then call their readings secondary. Oralthorn passed overhead again. The old repair seam along his wing flashed bright under strain, then softened when the wing beat changed. The red mark at the forward buckle did not soften. Cassiel saw both. Who decided the seam readings were secondary? He asked. Roysten's voice stayed level. My office classified them. Your office, Cassiel repeated. Under Marshal review. Elowyn lifted her crooked hand, just enough for the silver cord to catch the light. Ask why my seam readings became irrelevant only after they cleared the seams. The surgeon opened a smaller medical slate from the case. Oralthorn. Seam yield stable through ascent and turn. Veskir. Seam edge intact under lower strain correction. Maroon. Old tear line stable during shoulder ring pressure. Roysten exhaled once. Those readings do not clear her repair method. They show only that the seams had not failed at the moment they were observed. That is what a strain reading is, Elowyn said. A record of what happened when the wing was asked to hold. Cassiel's fingers tightened around the review slate. Who had access to her medical repair files? The hospital archive, Roysten said. And the Marshal office? For review purposes. Did I read the full logs or only the summary before signing the banishment? Roysten paused just long enough for Elowyn to feel the answer before he gave it. Only the summary, Majesty. The cut cord bit into her fingers. Cassiel looked down at the banishment line. The order cited the summary as complete. Roysten answered quickly. Complete for command purposes. Did it mention the excluded seam readings? No. Did it mention that all recorded repair seams remained stable during formation strain? No, Majesty. The word moved through the hospital yard like a blade turned flat. It did not cut yet. It pressed. Elowyn watched Cassiel take the pressure of it. His gaze dropped to the line that had called her 23 years of work a risk. She remembered his first dragon under winter fever, how young Cassiel had stood useless beside the bed, until she placed a needle in his hand and told him to hold the lamp or leave. He had stayed then. Today, he had stayed behind Roysten until the sky forced him to read. Do not make memory do the work you would not do, she said. Cassiel looked at her. There was pain in him now, and she hated that some old part of her still knew its shape. You are right, he said quietly. Roysten's head turned. Elowyn did not soften. Then read louder. Cassiel did. The summary review named Elowyn Sablemere's repair seams as the failure risk, while excluding recorded seam yield readings, showing those seams remained stable under formation strain. Roysten's face remained composed. Majesty, temporary suspension remained reasonable under uncertainty. Banishment is not suspension when you cut her cord in front of the hospital, Cassiel said. The words struck the younger surgeons first. Several looked toward the floor where the silver cord had fallen. Elowyn felt the ache rise. She forced it back down. Do not decorate the record with outrage, she said. Write what was omitted. Cassiel lowered his eyes first, as he should have done before signing anything with her name on it. Tension, log, omission, he ordered. Tension, log, omission. The flight line review blamed Elowyn Sablemere's silver thread repairs, although the summary omitted recorded seam readings that showed the repair lines stable under formation strain. By the time the last omitted reading was entered, the flight hospital had stopped pretending the parade was only a celebration. The dragons still crossed the avenue, but the crowd watched them differently now. Every wing beat became evidence. Every widened formation became a question no banner could cover. Cassiel Vardane opened the recovery release book that Roysten Crail had kept apart from the trial logs. Roysten's hand moved once toward the cover, then stopped. Majesty, recovery releases concern battle readiness. They are not part of a repair fault review. Elowyn Sablemere stood outside the east gate, where her banishment still held her beyond the threshold of the hospital she had kept alive for 23 years. Read readiness before blame, she said. Cassiel turned the first page. Oralthorn, wing tier closed by silver repair. Recovery status, incomplete. Oralthorn passed overhead, slower now, his forward buckle still marked red. Under his left wing, the living wing stitches brightened just enough to show a small recovery mark beside Elowyn's name. Day 6 of 14, Elowyn said. The stitch records hold date as well as strain. Cassiel read the next line. Return to command formation under Marshal override. Roysten gave a controlled nod. Temporary override. The Eastern Victory Parade required symbolic strength. The dragon was cleared for limited display. By whom? Cassiel asked. My office. Elowyn's damaged fingers tightened around the cut mender's cord. Ask whether my recovery hold was lifted. Cassiel looked down. Medical recovery hold entered by Elowyn Sablemere. Minimum rest, 14 days, lifted after 6. Roysten answered before the younger surgeon could. The mender's rest recommendations exceeded battle necessity. A healing wing is not a recommendation, Elowyn said. It is a body deciding whether it can survive command. Cassiel turned the second page. Vesgear. Lower membrane repair. Recovery incomplete. Returned under Marshal override. Roysten's voice remained calm. Vesgear resisted ground rest. Some dragons weaken if kept from flight. Elowyn looked at the handlers. Did he resist rest, or did he resist the harness? No one answered. One handler's face changed enough. Cassiel saw it. Speak. The handler swallowed. Veskir would settle when the wing cradle was used. He struck only when the lower cross strap was tightened. Roysten turned slowly. You are a handler, not a physician. And yet he knew which touch caused pain, Elowyn said. Cassiel's jaw tightened. He read the third page. Maroon, shoulder ring recovery hold, incomplete, returned under Marshal override. This time the crowd made no sound at all. They had spent all morning learning that silence could be complicity. Cassiel looked at Roysten. All 3 faltering dragons were returned before recovery completion. Under legal override, Roysten said, Wartime Readiness Authority allows command return when the crown requires visible strength. The war is over, Elowyn said. The kingdom still needs to see victory. No, she said. You needed injured wings to carry your version of it. The words crossed the threshold before she did. Cassiel absorbed them like a strike he had earned. He looked at the release book again. Were Elowyn's recovery holds included in the review summary? The younger surgeon answered, voice rough. No, Majesty. Were the Marshal overrides included? No. Roysten's expression hardened by a breath. The review concerned failure cause, not recovery timing. Recovery timing is failure, because when you force an unfinished wing into command, Elowyn said. Cassiel closed his eyes once. When he opened them, the king was still there, but the man beneath had begun to bleed through. His gaze dropped to her hands. Not her face, her hands. She hated that he finally looked at them when the damage had become useful. He remembered. She knew it before he spoke. The winter emergency flight, his first dragon, Soryn, nearly falling from the Black Pass. Elowyn wrapping both hands into the torn wing seam and holding until silver thread could catch. Tendons in her fingers burning, then breaking into the crooked shape she wore now. Elowyn, he said low. No, she answered. Do not remember my hands because his book cornered you. He flinched, and for once she let him. Cassiel looked back to the release book. Who approved the override authority used on these 3 dragons? Roysten bowed. I did, Majesty, under the authority granted to Marshal command. And I granted that authority. Yes, Majesty. There it was. A chain without iron. Cassiel had not tied the harnesses himself. He had not lifted the recovery holds with his own hand, but he had given Roysten the power to make unfinished wings obey, then believed him when he blamed the woman who had tried to let them heal. He did not ask her for mercy. That was the only reason she could keep standing. Enter it, Cassiel said. Recovery override record. The 3 dragons blamed on Elowyn Sablemere's silver thread repairs had all been returned to command formation under Roysten Crail's Marshal override before their medical recovery holds were complete. The release book did what the glowing sky had not. It changed need into consequence. Oralthorn came down hard in the lower parade yard with his left wing half open and shaking against the command harness. The crowd saw only the stumble. The handlers heard the breath catch. Elowyn Sablemere heard the old repair seam stretch within safe yield and the new buckle bite where no healed membrane should have been forced to answer command. Clear the avenue, Cassiel Vardane ordered. Roysten Crail stepped beside him at once. Majesty, removing the lead dragon from parade formation will be read as weakness. Cassiel looked at the dragon, not the crowd. Then let them read accurately. The words moved through Elowyn before she could stop them. Too late, she told herself. A good sentence after harm was still only a sentence. A handler ran toward the gate. Mender Sablemere, the seam is holding, but the buckle has drawn heat under the shoulder. Roysten's voice cut cleanly across him. Former mender, she is under banishment. Elowyn looked through the bars. A title cut from an apron does not remove what I know. Cassiel turned to her. What does he need? Release the command harness. Cool the buckle burn. Rest the wing under cradle tension for 14 days. Roysten shook his head. 14 days would remove the king's lead dragon from victory command. Then victory can learn to stand without borrowing pain, Elowyn said. Oralthorn gave one low, strained rumble. Not speech, not judgment. A body under stress, answering a strap. Cassiel moved toward the gate. Open it. Elowyn did not step forward when the lock lifted. That stopped him more than a closed door would have. Elowyn. No, she said. His face tightened. He is hurting. Yes, and that is why I will not repair him under the same command that can send him back into the sky before the thread cools. Roysten seized the moment with practiced sorrow. Majesty, she is withholding care to force policy. Elowyn's eyes went to him. I am refusing to make my hands the bridge between your orders and their bodies. The handlers nearest Oralthorn lowered their gaze. Several had tightened those same straps. Several had believed the Marshal standard because the Marshal sounded safer than doubt. Cassiel's voice dropped. What are you asking? Not asking, she said, stating a condition. No royal dragon I mend returns to command until a medical recovery hold outranks Marshal override. Roysten's composure hardened. That authority belongs to command. Then command may stitch the wing. Silence struck the yard with more force than a shout. Cassiel looked at her damaged fingers wrapped in the severed cord. Memory crossed his face again, and this time she hated him for letting everyone see it. Do not remember Soryn now, she said. The name found him like a blade under armor. Roysten glanced between them. Soryn has no bearing on this review. He has every bearing, Elowyn said, still watching Cassiel. Your first dragon flew because I held his wing closed with these hands when no harness could carry him. I did not damage them, so a Marshal could call recovery disobedience 23 years later. Cassiel lowered his eyes first. Good. Pain without action deserved no witness. He took the recovery release book from the clerk and opened it on the stone rail. Enter temporary medical supremacy for Oralthorn. Roysten stepped forward. Majesty? Temporary is not enough, Elowyn said. Cassiel looked at her. The old pull between them rose, dangerous and useless. He wanted to save the dragon. He wanted to repair the moment. He wanted, perhaps, for one correct choice, to open the gate she had closed inside herself. She gave him none of it. Write it for all royal wings under active living wing stitch repair, she said. Recovery hold outranks, Marshal override, until seam yield release is entered by the registered mender or a lawful medical board. Roysten's voice turned quieter. That would remove command discretion from the flight line. No, Elowyn said. It removes injured bodies from your discretion. Cassiel looked at Oralthorn. The dragon's wing trembled again. The silver seam held. The buckle burn darkened. Then Cassiel took the stylus. He wrote slowly enough that everyone could see he knew what the words cost his command. Roysten did not stop him. He could not with the lead dragon shaking under the very standard he had defended. Cassiel signed. Only then did Elowyn step through the gate. She did not look at him as she passed. She went to Oralthorn, unclipped the forward buckle with one careful motion, and placed her crooked fingers above the old seam. I am not returning you to glory, she whispered to the dragon. I am returning you to healing. The living wing stitches dimmed from parade silver to soft surgical blue, recording rest instead of strain. Medical supremacy condition. Elowyn Sablemere refused further royal wing repair under Marshal return to command authority until Cassiel Vardane entered that active living wing stitch recovery holds outranked Marshal override for every repaired royal. Dragon. Cassiel Vardane's first true repair did not begin with Elowyn's name. It began with grounding the sky. He stood at the edge of the parade yard while Oralthorn's wing cooled beneath cradle tension and Elowyn Sablemere's crooked hands checked the seam without haste. The royal dragons above the capital were still moving in widened formation, their banners trailing glory over a hospital that had nearly made pain look like discipline. Cassiel turned to the hornmaster. Recall the parade wing. Roysten Crail's head snapped toward him. Majesty, the capital is watching. Then they will watch us stop hurting dragons. The hornmaster sounded the recall before Roysten could shape another objection. One by one, the battle dragons descended from the avenue. No bowing, no miracle. Only heavy bodies, strained wings, and handlers loosening straps that had been called standard all morning. Elowyn did not look up from Oralthorn. A recall is not restoration. I know, Cassiel said. Do you? His hand tightened at his side, but he did not reach for her. I know it is only the first act that does not ask you to pay for my delay. Roysten moved closer to the clerks. Grounding the full parade wing on incomplete review will damage royal confidence. Elowyn clipped a cooling brace under Oralthorn's shoulder. Royal confidence has survived worse than truth. Wings do not. Cassiel looked to the younger surgeon. Bring the Marshal access register. Roysten's calm sharpened. For what purpose? To learn who had the seam readings before the summary omitted them. The flightline review was compiled under proper authority. Then the register will not frighten you. The register came from the hospital archive in a red leather cover. Elowyn recognized the binding. She had signed beside it for 23 years when sending seam yield readings from medical files to Flight Command. Her hands had hurt on rainy days. She had written anyway because numbers were harder to bury than memory. Cassiel opened it. Who accessed Elowyn's seam yield files before the banishment summary? The younger surgeon read, Hospital Archive Transfer. Flight Marshal Office Receipt. Roysten Crail, Final Review Authority. Roysten inclined his head. Final Review Authority does not mean personal selection of every included line. Elowyn looked at him over Oralthorn's wing. No, it means your office had the readings before your summary, pretended they did not matter. Cassiel turned another page. Were the stable seam readings attached to the Marshal packet? The surgeon swallowed. They were received. Attached? No, Majesty, Roysten said. Medical archive material is often summarized to prevent conflicting interpretation by non-medical command staff. Elowyn's voice stayed low. You protected command from the part that cleared the wound? Cassiel flinched once. She saw it and hated that she still noticed. Did I receive the access register before signing her banishment? He asked. No, Majesty, the surgeon said. Did the banishment packet identify the summary as selective? No. Roysten's expression remained polished, but he had stopped folding his hands. Majesty, selective is not false. A command summary is allowed to condense. Condense? Elowyn said. Not erase the only readings that answered the charge. Oralthorn shifted under her hand. The living wing stitches gave a faint, surgical blue pulse along the old tier line. Elowyn checked the tension and nodded to the handler. Rest mark stable. Do not tighten the cradle beyond my thread count. The handler obeyed without looking at Roysten. That small obedience changed the air. Cassiel saw it. So did Roysten. Elowyn, Cassiel said, quieter. She did not let the softness settle. If you need to say something, say it to the record. He lowered his eyes to the register. Flight Marshal Roysten Crail's office received the seam yield readings before the banishment summary was entered, he said. The summary did not attach them. My order relied on that summary. The admission landed in public without ornament. Roysten's mouth tightened. You relied on a lawful Marshal office. I relied on a summary that hid the measure of the wound. Elowyn's breath caught before she could stop it. Cassiel did not turn that into permission. He faced the hospital, the handlers, the grounded dragons, and the clerks who had written her removal. All royal battle flights are suspended until every repaired wing is checked against its living wing stitch seam yield file and current harness fit. No dragon returns to command by Marshal override alone. Roysten stepped forward. Majesty, that strips my office of readiness authority. No, Cassiel said. It strips your office of the right to outrank the wound. Elowyn closed Oralthorn's brace and stood. For one dangerous moment, Cassiel looked at her as if he wanted thanks. She gave him truth instead. Do not look for forgiveness in the first useful thing you have done. He bowed his head, not deeply enough for the court, but enough for her to see the pride it cost. I will look in the work, he said. Authority chain record. Roysten Crail's Marshal office received Elowyn Sablemere's stable seam yield readings before the banishment summary was entered. But the summary omitted those readings before Cassiel Vardane signed the banishment order. The grounded parade wing left the capital with nothing to cheer. Dragons filled the lower yard of Blackwind Flight Hospital one by one, their battle banners removed, their command harnesses loosened, their wings lowered into cradle frames instead of victory formation. The city had come to see strength above the rooftops. Now it watched handlers carry cooling cloths, splint keys, and seam lamps across the stones. Elowyn Sablemere stood inside the gate at last, not because the banishment had been lifted, because Oralthorn's wing needed the angle of her hand. Cassiel Vardane knew the difference. She saw it in the way he kept himself at the edge of the treatment circle, near enough to hear, too far to pretend he belonged beside her. Roysten Crail stood with the grounded command officers, his face smooth and unreadable. Majesty, the suspension has already disrupted the parade. A full wing stitch audit before the public will turn repair work into spectacle. Elowyn fastened a seam lamp beneath Veskir's lower membrane. The spectacle began when you cut my cord. A few younger surgeons went still. Roysten's voice softened. No one disputes that Widow Sablemere served with dedication, but a public audit by the accused mender risks emotional interpretation. Elowyn looked up from the lamp. Then let the stitches read dates, not feelings. Cassiel's gaze sharpened. Can they? They already did. She touched the old repair seam, and the silver thread answered with a faint surgical glow. Living wing. Stitches record 4 things under proper lamp strain: date of repair, wound condition, seam, yield rating, and recovery release. They do not testify. They display what the wing carried. Roysten turned toward the witnesses. Medical displays require controlled conditions. Then control them, Elowyn said. Lamp height 12 inches. Wing half open. No command harness attached. 3 witnesses reading the same line. Cassiel looked to the hospital clerks. Set the lamps. Roysten's jaw tightened. Majesty, you wanted the kingdom to see strength, Cassiel said. It will see the condition of what carried it. Elowyn did not thank him. She placed both damaged hands beneath Veskir's wing. Pain moved through her knuckles, old and familiar, but she let none of it reach her face. The seam lamp brightened. Silver words appeared along the repair line, not large enough for the crowd to romanticize from a distance, but clear enough for the 3 witnesses standing close. Veskir, the younger surgeon read. Lower membrane tier, repaired by Elowyn Sablemere. Seam yield stable. Recovery hold, 12 days. A second line emerged. Released to formation on day 5 by Marshal override. The handler beside Veskir closed his eyes. Roysten said, limited formation does not equal battle command. Elowyn turned to the next wing. Then we will read the next limited formation. Oralthorn, day 6 of 14. Merun, day 7 of 16. 2 more dragons were brought forward. One carried a wing edge Elowyn had stitched 9 years ago after a storm breach. Another bore a repair from the Western campaign, silver thread so fine only the lamp could find it. Both showed stable seam yield. Both showed early release by Marshal override during the weeks before public victory flights. Cassiel listened without interrupting. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Roysten shifted strategy with the grace of a man who had survived courts by changing rooms without opening doors. Majesty, the audit confirms repeated reliance on Elowyn's repair method. That reliance may itself explain why the flight line became dependent on unregulated mending. Elowyn straightened slowly. The yard seemed to feel the movement before it understood it. Unregulated? She asked. Roysten inclined his head. Your work became too central to royal readiness. No, she said. My work became invisible enough for you to spend. Cassiel looked at her then. Not with command, not with defense, with pain held behind the teeth because she had taught him, too late, not to put it in her hands. Elowyn stepped away from Veskir's wing and lifted the severed mender's cord. I will not take this back today, she said. Cassiel's face changed. Roysten's eyes flickered with relief. Elowyn saw both. I will not mend another royal dragon under a cord that lets command override recovery, omit seam readings, and call care a weakness when it becomes inconvenient. Cassiel's voice came rough. What will you take? She looked at the grounded dragons, the handlers, the surgeons, the witnesses, and finally at him. Not a pardon, not your gratitude, not the place I held before it was useful to throw me out. She laid the cut cord across the treatment stone. I will take recovery authority written above Marshal command, public wing stitch audits for every injured battle dragon, and my name restored to every repair record where it was hidden beneath royal glory. Roysten spoke sharply. That would make a mender answer above a marshal. Elowyn's eyes stayed on Cassiel. No, she said. It would make the wound answer before the war. Cassiel bowed his head once. Then, in front of the grounded dragons and the city that had watched her banished, he moved the royal seal from Roysten's table to Elowyn's treatment stone. Write her terms, he said. Elowyn did not smile. She touched the first audit slate herself. Wingstitch audit claim. Elowyn Sablemere refused restoration under the old command structure and claimed public living wingstitch audit authority before further royal repairs, requiring recovery holds, seam yield readings. and registered mender names to outrank Marshal readiness summaries. By sunset, the victory parade had become a public ward. The banners hung above the avenue, but no dragon flew beneath them now. They rested in cradle frames across Blackwind Flight Hospital's lower yard, while seam lamps burned along wing after wing. Citizens stood with handlers, surgeons, officers, and clerks, watching repair records answer where command summaries had failed. Elowyn Sablemere stood at the treatment stone, with the cut mender's cord beside her and the royal seal before her. She had not picked up either one. Cassiel Vardane stood across from her, crownless, his dark coat stripped of parade clasps. Roysten stood to his right, composed enough to look wronged by procedure. "The audit has established recovery concerns," Roysten said. "It need not become a spectacle of old medical history." Elowyn adjusted the seam lamp over Oralthorn's left wing. "You liked history when it hid my name." Cassiel looked to the clerks. "Begin with every dragon returned under martial override." Roysten's voice sharpened. "Majesty, that exceeds the original review." "No," Cassiel said. "The original review was too small to hold the truth." The first lamp flared blue. Oralthorn's living wing stitches brightened across the old tier line. The record appeared in 4 narrow bands: wound condition, repair date, seam yield rating, recovery release. The younger surgeon read, "Oralthorn, severe left flight membrane tear, repaired by Elowyn Sablemere. Seam yield stable, recovery hold 14 days. Released to parade formation day 6 by Marshal override." A second line rose beneath it. "Condition at release, heat under forward command buckle, incomplete membrane rest, buckle pressure, incompatible with seam yield rating." A handler cursed softly. Roysten lifted one hand. "Post-release condition can be misread under public lamp strain." Elowyn moved the lamp to Veskir. "Then let the next wing be wrong in the same language." Veskir's stitches answered. Then Marin's. Then 7 more. The pattern grew too consistent to call grief, too technical to call sentiment. "Stable repair, incomplete hold, Marshal override, harness pressure incompatible with seam yield, returned before recovery release." Cassiel's face became harder with every reading. Roysten looked toward the officers. "Battle doctrine has always required command discretion." Elowyn faced him. "Command discretion is not a license to spend unfinished bodies and bill the wound to the woman who mended them." The crowd did not cheer. Instead, surgeons opened archive slates without being ordered. Handlers stepped closer to the dragons they had once returned too soon. Cassiel took the final audit slate. "Soryn," he read. Elowyn's breath stopped. The black dragon in the far cradle lifted his head. Older now, scarred along the right-wing route, Cassiel's first dragon. Elowyn's hands remembered before her heart could refuse. The winter pass. Enemy fire. The wings splitting open mid-flight. Her palms pressed against living heat, while Cassiel begged her to hold him together until the landing ridge. The seam lamp touched Soryn's wing. Silver lines opened across the ancient repair. "Emergency royal flight injury," the surgeon read quietly. "Right wing root rupture. Held manually under flight pressure by Elowyn Sablemere before full stitch placement. Permanent hand damage recorded. Recovery hold 21 days. Cassiel closed his eyes once. The next line appeared. "Return to command day 9 under Marshal readiness pressure." Roysten said nothing. That silence was worse than denial. Cassiel opened his eyes and looked at the yard, not at Elowyn first. "The court will hear this clearly. I banished Elowyn Sablemere after accepting a Marshal summary that omitted stable seam readings, ignored recovery holds, and hid the condition of dragons returned too soon. I did not examine the harnesses. I did not read the full records. I allowed her name to be cut from the work that kept my flight alive." He turned then, but he did not step closer. "Elowyn, the wrong was public. The correction will remain public whether or not you ever forgive me." Her throat tightened. She let it. She did not let it rule her. Roysten finally moved. "Majesty, I acted under authority granted to me." Cassiel looked at him, "and I am ending that authority." He placed the Marshal seal on the treatment stone beside Elowyn's severed cord. "Flight Marshal Roysten is removed from command pending judgment by wing stitch audit and recovery law. No royal dragon under repair returns to battle, parade, or formation until medical release outranks command readiness. Elowyn Sablemere's name will be restored to every repair record, not as decoration, but as authorship. Elowyn touched the cut cord. Then she left it lying there. "I will not take back the old cord," she said. "It let men use my hands and hide my name." Cassiel bowed his head. "Then tell me what replaces it." "An office no marshal can overrule. A recovery law written above command. And time." His voice lowered. "For the dragons?" "For them first." She looked at him then. "For me, if I ever choose it." He accepted that without reaching for her. "I will wait in the law I failed to read," he said. Elowyn lifted the royal seal, pressed it into the first new recovery charter, and wrote her name in full where the kingdom could see it. Final wing stitch reversal. The living wing stitches publicly displayed the dates, wound conditions, seam yield ratings, and premature marshal releases of the royal battle dragons, proving Roysten Crail's command system hid Elowyn Sablemere's authorship while forcing injured wings back into service before recovery was complete.